3 words that have haunted a small town for 5 years.
It's every town USA, and those things don't happen in every town USA. But it happened in Delphi, Indiana.
A chilling discovery.
Why Libby? Why Abby?
That turned a safe haven into a crime scene.
I don't think you have to be embarrassed if you're scared right now. A lot of people in town are scared.
Tonight, a case the world refuses to give up on.
We told each other we loved each other, and that was the last time I saw her.
Following every lead.
I still get probably 25 and 40 direct tips a week right here, literally from around the world.
And every clue.
On the surface, it appears like the police have a lot, right?
Trying to unlock the mystery.
And yet here we are 5 years later.
Fit the pieces together.
We have hope.
Together, we'll get this guy.
Solve the unsolved.
We must keep our resolve for Libby and Abby to ensure that good trumps evil.
And catch a killer.
They're watching. And we'll meet them soon. We'll meet them.
A special edition of NewsNation Prime starts right now.
Live from NewsNation headquarters, this is NewsNation Prime with Marni Hughes.
Good evening, and thank you for joining us. I'm Marni Hughes. Tonight, we are bringing you a special hour of NewsNation Prime. Over the course of the next hour, we are focusing on this one unsolved case that has gripped the country and the world for 5 years. It centers around the small town of Delphi, Indiana, located a little more than a half an hour north of Indianapolis. 2 young girls, best friends, Abby Williams and Libby German, 13 and 14 years old, were out for a walk on a popular hiking trail when they were brutally murdered. Their bodies found 5 years ago today, on Valentine's Day. From the very beginning, authorities have said this case can and will be solved. They have video and audio of the killer, but this person is still out there, living among us. Someone, somewhere, knows something. Tonight, we are taking you back to Delphi, laying out the case, what we have learned over the last 5 years. Investigators say this case is not cold, and they are still getting up to 40 tips a week. One of the people leading the investigation, Doug Carter, the Superintendent of Indiana State Police, will be joining us for a live, rare interview. But our coverage begins now with investigative correspondent Rich McHugh.
Delphi, Indiana. Population 3,000, nestled among a network of parks and wilderness trails, is like many Midwestern towns, quiet and peaceful. But 5 years ago, that peace was shattered. 13-year-old Abby Williams.
It's a scarf.
No.
It's just pink.
And 14-year-old Libby German.
This Hershey gets it into this iced coffee and make it coffee kiss.
Best friends and your typical happy-go-lucky 8th graders. On the afternoon of February 13, 2017, Libby asked her older sister Kelsey to drive them to the nature trails.
So they just got out of the car and walked down the trail to go to High Bridge. We told each other we loved each other, and that was the last time I saw her.
At approximately 2:05 p.m., Libby posts to Snapchat this picture of the Monon High Bridge. At 2:07, she posts this picture of Abby walking across the bridge. It was the last correspondence from either of them. Hours passed, nearing dark, and nobody could reach the girls.
So we knew something wasn't quite right, so we said, you know what, we're all going to go to the trails and look too.
Searched along, the hillside and in and around the High Bridge area where they'd been dropped off, and that led to obviously the wee early hours. I come home and I grabbed a couple hours. I was back down there at daylight. there was hundreds and hundreds of people that showed up volunteering to come put them into a search party and let them go.
I looked up and the coroner's van come driving by, and that's when it hit me that they weren't found alive.
Authorities found Abby and Libby in a wooded area a half-mile upstream from the bridge. The girls had been murdered.
What does that do to you as a mother?
There's no words for it.
It affects us hard, you know, as a family. I didn't sleep for a long time.
You worry about them dating and driving and going to college, not going out for a walk on a beautiful February afternoon.
Why Libby? Why Abby? Somebody knows. And if you're watching, we'll find you.
Authorities released this picture taken on Libby's phone and this chilling audio recorded on Libby's phone. Guys, down the hill.
To hear that person's voice, it's creepy.
Kind of puts chills down your spine.
And they released a sketch of the suspect.
It sucks knowing that, like, he's still out there.
A lot of people in town are scared.
The FBI joined the investigation.
Our investment in that investigation has been and continues to be significant.
But after 1 year, no arrests.
Until there's somebody arrested, we're interested in almost everybody.
2 years after the murders, police released this video of the man, taken by Libby, walking toward them on the bridge. And they released a second sketch of a much younger man. State police saying the case had shifted in a new direction and that the suspect is between the ages of 18 and 40.
We believe you are hiding in plain sight. We likely have interviewed you or someone close to you.
But 2 more years passed without an arrest. Then, last month, another twist in the case. Police appealed for tips about a person tied to a social media account with the name Anthony Shots. They say the man behind the account, Keegan Anthony Klein, was using images of a known male model to catfish young girls into sending nude photos in their home address. Klein was arrested, charged with child solicitation and pornography in unrelated cases. And they asked anyone who ever communicated with the fake online account to come forward.
He may have shared inadvertently or intentionally some personal information that could be valuable.
Police say the fake online accounts were active in 2016 and 2017, around the time when Libby and Abby were murdered. But they will not confirm whether Libby and Abby communicated with this profile.
Do you think it's possible that your sister and Abby were communicating with this account?
I think that the account is definitely important and that we have to keep sharing it and putting it out there because for whatever reason, law enforcement thinks it's important.
Do you think the authorities are close?
I have to hope so.
When you see that little snippet of video and you listen to that audio, what do you hear? What do you see?
It's awful. It's awful to think that, you know, that was the last thing our girls heard.
What is the focus of your investigation right now, and what is the evidence telling you?
Well, I'm not going to talk about the evidence.
The likelihood is that it's somebody from around here.
But I'm pretty confident in the place where we are right now.
And that's the scary part, is that it could be anybody that I see every day.
And eventually the world's going to know what we do.
You know, we're probably all in for some sort of surprise or shock when this all plays out.
You say eventually the world is going to know. Does that mean you are close, in your opinion?
I think we're closer every day. We're closer every single day.
I don't know exactly what that means, but I believe them.
They're watching. And we'll meet them soon. We'll meet them.
Investigative correspondent Rich McHugh is standing by with more reporting tonight, still ahead in the next hour. Rich sat down one-on-one with Superintendent Doug Carter with the Indiana State Police to discuss key parts of the investigation, including the decision to release those 2 very different sketches years apart. And then Superintendent Carter will also join me live right here on Prime in a rare live interview 5 years to the day of this horrible crime. And if you have any information that could help in this case, this unsolved murder, there is an anonymous tip line and also an email that has been set up that is on your screen right now. Still ahead, the case attracted interest from people all over the world online. What's helping and what's actually hurting the investigation? Next. Back now with a special edition of NewsNation Prime, the Delphi murders 5 years later. As we have mentioned, the biggest evidence in this case comes from Libby German's cell phone. That grainy image of a man on the High Bridge and an audio recording that the 14-year-old had the forethought to take, even in the face of danger. Hundreds, if not thousands, of tips have poured in from social media, internet sleuths, even podcasts about the murders of Abby and Libby. Correspondent Markie Martin joining us live now to talk about this piece of the puzzle. And Markie, it's not just this case. We have had several cases this year gain traction online. So how does this impact the investigation, and what does law enforcement think about it?
Hey, good evening, Marni. It really depends on who you ask. You know, we've had some agencies who say they are completely on board with help from social media. And then you have other agencies who think it actually dilutes the investigative work at hand. But two things are for certain, and that is social sleuthing. It's a double-edged sword. And also, this group of online detectives is a growing group, and they are on the case.
Social media allows law enforcement to be proactive, to get things in front of the masses.
Arlington, Texas is home to one of the most infamous unsolved murder cases in the country, that of 9-year-old Amber Hagerman, whose 1996 abduction and brutal murder eventually inspired the life-saving Amber Alert. Her killer has never been caught. Still, police here continue to work the case and frequently update and monitor social media for new leads. Deputy Chief Christopher Cook tells NewsNation, at first, his investigators feared the internet.
I remember when we first adopted social media, trying to get information from detectives was like pulling teeth, because they really didn't know exactly how's this going to work, or is this going to work myself out of a job where I'm no longer needed as a detective, and quite the contrary.
He says there are many cases his department wouldn't have solved without it, but on major cases like the Delphi murders, online tips come in so quickly it can overwhelm investigators, especially in smaller departments.
We have this amazing ability to communicate today, and I don't understand it. I'm not going to pretend to.
Indiana State Police Superintendent Doug Carter says his officers have received information about the Delphi murders from around the globe, but it turns problematic when internet sleuths make accusations and post them publicly. It happened for his teams numerous times after sketches of a potential suspect were released.
I think when people start doing their own investigation and start comparing what they think, that creates problems. We ask them not to do that. There are a lot of people that look like the sketches that we've released. And then when you blow that out there with a picture of somebody that they think next to a sketch, imagine what it does to that person if they're not involved at all.
There's no perfect system, but ultimately, the overall goal for everybody involved should be to find the killer.
Derek Levasseur hosts a popular podcast called Crime Weekly. He says the Delphi murders is the type of case his fans really get into.
I think the web sleuths out there are baffled by this case because on the surface, it appears like the police have a lot, right? We have the suspect's voice, we have video for the alleged suspect, and yet here we are 5 years later talking on the anniversary, and there's still no one that's been charged with the murder of Libby and Abby.
And the biggest reminder from law enforcement to the true crime community, a laptop isn't a badge.
Certainly we want the tips and we don't want to shy away from people sending us information, but there is sometimes a line that is crossed. Some people are really their own private investigators. They'll take a piece of information that's come out from a law enforcement agency and all of a sudden they're kind of on the trail.
Yeah, so Marni, unfortunately, this entire social media conversation doesn't really come with a conclusive answer. You get the good with the bad. Of course, the bad is that misinformation can spread like wildfire. Completely innocent people can become suspects overnight in the court of public opinion. But as you mentioned off the top, just in the past year, we've had some really big cases that have been solved largely in part due to social media. Gabby Petito comes to mind first. The two children who were kidnapped, Amber and Noah Claire, they were eventually identified in California because of social media. And then, of course, with these Delphi murders, investigators and the family really have a better sense of the timeline of those girls because of social and what they shared on Snapchat.
Yeah, it could be the critical information they need. Markie, in your talks with law enforcement, did they provide any guidance to the folks who do want to help, albeit from a keyboard?
I asked Chief Cook from Arlington PD that very question. He said the thing that has to stop is people posting what their gut or their hunch is telling them. He says that is not helpful. It also becomes hazardous when online sleuths really think they can solve it. They show up to scenes, they start trespassing on public property. He says that has to stop as well. If you have a lead, take it straight to the police department. And then he says for people who are just kind of consuming posts and information online, don't believe everything that you read, of course, and really be smart about what you decide to share, who you decide to engage with, because on the other side of that screen is a whole law enforcement team that's having to dig through every single thing that is posted online with these cases. Marnie.
Markie, thank you. Good advice. Coming up next, one-on-one with Indiana State Police Superintendent Doug Carter. What he is sharing tonight about where the case stands now. Welcome back to a special edition of NewsNation Prime, the Delphi murders. This investigation into the deaths of Abby Williams and Libby German has gone unsolved for 5 years now. All this time trying to figure out what exactly happened on the bridge that day in Delphi and why. For the top investigator, Indiana State Police Superintendent Doug Carter, it is the case he thinks about constantly. And in his extensive one-on-one sit-down with investigative correspondent Rich McHugh, it is clear he believes they are closer now than ever.
Superintendent, thank you for doing this. We're on 5 years now. What does this case mean to you?
I think it's the totality of evil in my career. There's not many waking minutes that I'm not thinking about those two little girls.
It was on this trail 5 years ago that Abby and Libby set off on. It connects just up the way to the Monon High Bridge and the area where the next day their bodies were discovered. That was Valentine's Day 2017. It set off a massive police investigation, and it has become one of Indiana's most notorious unsolved murder cases.
What is the focus of your investigation right now, and what is the evidence telling you?
Well, I'm not going to talk about the evidence. There's been a tremendous amount of speculation, Rich, about what we know and what we don't know. But I'm pretty confident in the place where we are right now. Eventually, the world's going to know what we do. I still get between probably 25 and 40 direct tips a week right here, literally from around the world.
You say eventually the world is going to know. Does that mean you are close?
I think we're closer every day. We're closer every single day. The tips keep coming. And once that comes in, and once that completes itself, then we're going to have to assign another 60 or 80 detectives to this and go back through every single lead that we've ever gotten. I'm confident that there'll be a successful conclusion for Abby and Libby, for Mike and Becky and Anna, and for that community. I'm confident that there will.
Do you have a person or persons of interest, or do you have a suspect?
I'm confident that this will come to a conclusion eventually. We believe you are hiding in plain sight. We likely have interviewed you, or someone close to you.
In the past, you have said we have likely interviewed the killer. Do you still think that?
We're not going to singularly identify anyone right now, at least publicly. The detectives that have been assigned this, task forces have been assigned this, have talked to hundreds, if not thousands of people. And again, one day we'll be able to tell you why we did that and who did it.
Soon after the murders of Abby and Libby, police released audio and a short video taken by Libby on the bridge, asking for the public's help in identifying this man.
How important a piece of this puzzle is that video that Libby pulled out her phone and started recording? I mean, the wherewithal she must have had in that moment to do that.
Yeah, I'm not going to talk about that specifically, but what I will say about it is it adds, again, a little bit of weight to a very complicated murder investigation. So I'd much rather have it than not, I think, is how I'd respond to that.
The audio that you released, It says guys down the hill. Does guys and down the hill come right next to each other in the original recording?
Again, there's speculation about what that means, what was actually said, who said it, was it connected, was it the same voice? And again, that's an investigative component of this, and I'm not worthy to discuss it.
I've spoken to some people who were involved in the investigation early on, and they say that there's more. There's more video, there's more sound. Why not release more of that?
It's important that we don't show our hand, quite frankly. We're not going to explain what we know about the killer. We're not going to explain some of the intricate details of the death of Abby and Libby. Unfortunately, one day we're going to have to. And that's going to create a whole nother issue with family and friends and the community and the like. So from an investigative standpoint, I'm not going to talk any more about it.
The crime scene, the area where their bodies were found, is very hard to reach. And the speculation is that this is a person that was very familiar with the terrain. Can you speak to that at all?
One thing I'd say is any place in the country that's rural, there's multiple points of access, generally speaking. So again, there's a lot of speculation as to why they might have been there, but I'm not going to talk about it right now.
Early on, you released a sketch, and later you released a different sketch. Why have the sketches changed so dramatically?
Unfortunately, we're not in a position where we can tell everybody why we switch gears. And that's where the speculation begins, and that's where the animosity comes, and the frustration. And I understand it. I do understand it.
In December, police appealed for tips about a person tied to a social media account with the name Anthony Schatz. They say the man behind the account, Keegan Anthony Klein, was using images of a known male model to catfish young girls into sending nude photos and their home address. He was arrested and charged with child solicitation and pornography in an unrelated case.
Did Abby and Libby communicate with this profile?
I'm not going to talk about that, but I am going to say that we learned a tremendous amount through that particular investigative course.
What can you tell me about this man who has been arrested, the creator of this profile, Keegan Klein?
All I can say about Keegan is that entire issue and the entire release has allowed us to glean significant investigative leads.
I've seen in press briefings in the past where you've addressed this person or persons directly. Is there anything that you'd like to say to them?
They're watching. They're watching. And we'll meet them soon. We'll meet them.
And investigative correspondent Rich McHugh joining us live. Rich, you spoke with both Libby and Abby's families. Did they say if they're afraid? Are they fearful with this killer still out there?
For their safety, but they definitely said they are afraid, and there's fear that when this is ultimately solved, they are going to know who this person is. And because it's such a small community, you know, it's just a couple, 3,000 people. There's this fear that they're walking around every day and they're seeing this person, and so that's what's troubling to them.
So hard for that family and anyone who lives in Delphi. After interviewing the superintendent extensively, did you get this sense that they have zeroed in on someone specific?
You know, I've interviewed a lot of law enforcement in my life, and rarely are they this confident. So I did get the sense that he was wanting to almost just say, you know, here's what we know, which tells me, yes, they've either zeroed in on somebody or zeroed in on several people. But I get the sense that they are closing in on this thing.
What about the FBI? Are they still involved?
The sense I get is that they are. They were involved right from the beginning. A detective that was involved at the start tells me that the FBI presence was overwhelming. He's never seen anything like it. And just this week, actually, the FBI put out on their person of the week on their most wanted list this suspect. And so they're making a public appeal. So yes, they are still involved.
It is a puzzling case, Rich. You spent a lot of time in Delphi talking to all of those involved. And the more we learn about the case and think about it, I think that it's natural, human nature, to have a lot of theories. But right now, investigators seem to be remaining pretty tight-lipped on the evidence and what they know. Let's hope that means they're close. Rich McHugh, thank you. And if you would like to watch Rich's full interview with Superintendent Doug Carter, you can go to our website, NewsNationNow.com. And still ahead, keeping Abby and Libby's memories alive in a town trying to shake the fear 5 years later. Plus, that top investigator in the case will be joining me live with more on what they have found in the years following the death of these two young girls. Next, here on NewsNation Prime. Welcome back to our special report tonight, the Delphi murders 5 years later. The deaths of Libby German and Abby Williams shocked the Midwest and changed both of these girls' families forever. NewsNation's Keleigh Beeson joining us now. Keleigh, these girls were best friends. They wanted to spend some time together that day. They walked off onto this trail. We wanted to take some time tonight to focus on them, who they were, and what they meant to this community.
Well, from all accounts, Marni, both girls were full of energy and positivity with their entire lives ahead of them. Their families say it makes it difficult to grieve knowing their killer is still out there. They say they're doing what they can to help law enforcement while they await answers.
A tight-knit, quiet community.
The people in this town are wonderful.
The city of Delphi, Indiana, sits within a 3-mile radius, home to an extensive network of outdoor pathways.
It's more trails per capita than any other community in the state of Indiana.
And one of the most baffling crimes in the nation.
If you think about it too much, you'll go crazy.
Police believe a killer is likely hiding in plain sight, with an ego only growing as the murder of 2 young girls continues to go unsolved.
I think we're closer every day. We're closer every single day.
Since the deaths of 13-year-old Abby Williams and 14-year-old Libby German 5 years ago, the families are still coping with the loss.
It's changed my entire life.
It sits there. Birthdays, graduations, all of that.
Libby was the brightest person. She always wanted to make you smile, make you laugh, and make sure you're having a great day.
Abby was a bright, shining star with a very wonderful heart. Always dancing around the house and singing. She was a good kid.
Neighbors and loved ones have also been busy raising funds.
Favorite choose McDonald's, what can we make for you?
Through sales of burgers, t-shirts, and cookies, while also raising awareness and embracing new ways to make their community safer, starting with where Abby and Libby were first reported missing.
You're outside. You do stuff outside. That's what we have. So the trails is kind of what Delphi has.
Those areas now more secure after $100,000 was dedicated to cameras, signage, and lighting. All efforts made while law enforcement continues their tireless work to catch a killer on the loose.
But when we figure it all out and the last piece of the puzzle comes together, I think that'll be another hard day for this community.
And as was mentioned earlier, police not sharing details about the investigation. However, telling our crews they are confident they'll catch this killer and bring them to justice. Marni.
Keleigh, thank you. Next on Prime, a pastor from Delphi who has felt the weight of this crime on his community steps in to help heal. He'll be joining us live. And the top cop on the case is here as well to talk about the investigation, the questions, and the killer tonight. Life in Delphi, Indiana will never be the same after Abby Williams and Libby German were murdered. But the tragedy brought this small town together like never before. Memorials honor those 2 young girls today. A foundation was also created in their names to build a $1 million park that includes 3 ball fields, an amphitheater, and playgrounds. Todd Ladd is a pastor at Delphi United Methodist Church and has been part of this grieving and also healing process since the very beginning, and we are thankful he is joining us live tonight. Pastor, we appreciate your time. I'd like to begin with how you processed all of this. You have played a major role in helping Delphi heal and move forward. I'm sure you have had to answer a lot of difficult and almost impossible questions over the years. How do you reconcile this evil act?
You know, together as a community, we reconcile this. And really, we come at it with faith. As I've talked a lot about recently, we hold these 2 things together, this deep sadness and also a deep hope at the same time. You know, the hope is something that this will be solved. The hope is found in the resilience in the park and finding new life there. They've always had celebration of lives. So that helps us to see the hope there. And to be honest, though, we have a deep sadness too. and that's real.
Pastor, many people did not feel safe walking that trail after these murders were committed. Is there still that fear in Delphi?
I think a lot of people will still ask questions of what's going to happen. One of the things we did early on, probably within the first, I would say, 12 months or earlier, was we had a time in which we reclaimed the trails. We walked over them, we prayed over them. And we said, this is going to be something that won't define our community, but it'll help us to say, how do we move forward together?
5 years later, hard to believe Abby and Libby's killer is still out there. The case is unsolved. This person hasn't been caught. What's on your mind tonight?
It's just continued confidence in the investigators. I know them personally. I worship with them. I pray with them. I encourage them all on the path. And I know with a complete confidence that justice will come, and that justice might be here on this side of eternity, or it might be on the other side of eternity. Either way, I believe fully that justice will come.
I often wonder, when police released that video of the man on the bridge, the audio of his voice was so chilling. People everywhere started to look around, started to listen. Did you?
Absolutely. Frankly, the press conference in which we shared the audio and the video was held in our church. And that was a place which I was uncertain if we would ever have a press conference in a church. But when the community asked, we said, yeah, we have to have it there. And when I heard it there, I thought, this is going to help them find out who did this. And it'll help solve a lot of fears for our community.
Police say they're close. What will it mean to you and others to catch this killer?
For me, it's going to be a sense of conclusion, but it's also going to be opening another door. And that door to the trial, that door to what comes next, is one that also holds a bit of concern. What will that be like? It's going to be very hard. So it'll be only one step towards the next piece of closure.
A difficult one with details no one wants to hear. Pastor Todd Ladd, I appreciate you taking some time to be with us tonight, and thank you for what you're doing for that community then and now and in the days, weeks, and years to come.
Thank you for telling the story and keeping it out there.
You got it. Coming up, the lead investigator on the case, Superintendent Doug Carter, is standing by to talk about this investigation, where the case stands right now, 5 years later, and how close they are, in fact, to catching the person responsible. A rare live interview next here on Prime. So many questions tonight, 5 years later. Who killed Abby and Libby, and why? And will this killer be brought to justice? I'd like to welcome the top investigator on the case, Superintendent Doug Carter with the Indiana State Police. You've seen him a number of times throughout the show. He is joining us live tonight. Appreciate your time tonight.
It's a pleasure to be with you, Marni.
I was listening closely to your interview with our reporter, Rich McHugh, and at one point you said that the killer is watching and will meet them soon. And I couldn't help but notice you glanced at the camera as though you may have been looking at the killer. What makes you think that they're watching?
Well, I think that even though we're at the 5-year mark, I still believe, even today, that he knows what's happening. He knows what's happening nationally. He knows what's happening locally. He knows who's covering the story and what's being said, and very likely he's even going to be watching this interview tonight. And I want to clear, Marni, I'm not the lead detective, but I represent many of them that are on this case.
And I know there are many working tirelessly. You are front and center on many of the interviews, so I appreciate the clarification. Has the person responsible reached out to you or other investigators directly?
They have not. No, they have not.
In terms of the evidence, you say it's important that you don't show your hand. It's been 5 years, and you know the frustration from people who follow this case closely. They want answers. Wouldn't releasing information now, more information that you have, be helpful in producing more tips from the public?
Well, I know there's frustration. I know there's frustration locally, and there's frustration literally from around the world. I receive 25 to 30 tips a week just at my desk here in Indianapolis. So I know that there's frustration, and I know that there is a lot of speculative opinion about what we should do, criticism about what we've done, and how we've handled this up to this point. I would just say to that, Marni, that this is very, very dynamic. It hasn't slowed down too much over the course of these last few years, and I don't anticipate that it will. So everything is calculated. This has been a strategic process from the very beginning, and I completely support what the investigators have decided to do. You know, they've given their life to this, and I've developed lifelong friendships now with the family of Abby and Libby, and there's no one on the planet that wants to go to them more than me and say, we finally did it.
How much more video and audio evidence do you have?
I'm not going to talk about what we have that we haven't released. The purpose of this was to talk specifically about the human effect of this and what it's caused over the course of these last 5 years.
But can you confirm there is more evidence out there?
Yes, we have evidence that we've not released. And eventually I want to be able to tell the world what we know, and I believe that we will.
There is a report and some court documents that suggest there's up to 43 seconds of video. Can you confirm that?
I can't. I can't. Again, I'm not going to talk about what we know or about what I think. I must talk about what we know. And there are some things that we know that I just simply cannot release.
I understand. I'd like to talk about these two sketches that were released years apart by investigators. The images have caused quite a bit of speculation, also some confusion. Are there two suspects that you're looking for?
There are not. There are not. I saw some coverage tonight where I saw Becky was interviewed back in 2019 when that was done. And she said tonight it was like a gut punch. And I felt that gut punch tonight because I would never, ever intentionally cause that to happen. Again, this is very strategic. And I really believe, Marni, that eventually we're going to take both of those sketches. Remember, a sketch is not a photograph, but we'll take both of those sketches and we'll put them together and then remove them, and the killer will be behind them.
So is the sketch Sorry, go ahead.
No, go ahead, please.
I was just going to ask, is the sketch, how does the public receive this information? Is the sketch, the ultimate suspect, a combination of these two images put on this body that we're seeing on screen right now?
Yes, I believe that we'll be able to put the two of them together and drop the sketch, and that will be the person responsible for the death of Abby and Libby.
Do you anticipate releasing another sketch, perhaps a third sketch that is more of a cross between the two?
No, I have no intention of that happening. At least that's not what any of the detectives have brought to me or talked about.
DNA is critical to solving so many of these types of crimes. How important is it in a case like this?
Well, of course, it's very, very important. And technology associated, generally speaking, with complex homicide investigations continues to become better over time. And I think that will be the case with many of these unsolved crimes around the country as we continue to work through them and time goes by.
And is it an important component of this investigation?
It is.
Keegan Keleigh, he was brought up several times in our reporting tonight. He has not been named as a suspect. Has he been questioned in relation to this case, and why release that fake social media account? What was the purpose of that?
Yeah, again, a very dynamic situation and very strategic decision to do that. And what I can say about Keegan Keleigh is when that was released not long ago, significant tips have come in that have been very meaningful to us. So we're just beginning with the Anthony Schatz profile and what that might mean to the Delphi homicides.
What does the fake social media account have to do with your outreach to the public? What are you asking for from the public in terms of focusing on Keegan Keleigh, focusing on this Anthony Schatz, releasing that to the public? What is your message to people who may have crossed paths?
To let us know if they did. And we explained that pretty well when that was released, I thought. I felt that it was very well done, and we have received a tremendous amount of tips since then. So we'll follow up on every single one of those with anyone that's had any contact with Keegan Keleigh or Anthony Schatz.
Superintendent, the day that Abby and Libby's bodies were found, I know you were there. I know you chose to drive home the long way, as you say, to process what you had seen and He didn't listen to any music. He just thought about this horrific crime. What motivates you today, 5 years later, to solve this case?
There are so many pieces to it that have had such a detrimental effect on so many people. And we owe the community, we owe the family, we owe the state and literally the nation an explanation as to what happened. That's any town America, Marni. It's any town America. And the level of violence, it just gut-wrenching to me to think about what happened to those little girls and then ultimately what happened to the community. But I would like to say, even through all the criticism and all the things that we've been through associated with this, which I understand I'm not being critical of, so much good has come of this. That community in Carroll County and Delphi is wonderful. The people there, how they've responded to this, how they've come together in such a terrible, terrible, terrible dark time is something that I'll remember till my final day. I still spend time on that trail, and I still spend time in that small town. And I feel for the sheriff's office and the city PD there and the hundreds of people from the state police here in Indiana that have been involved in that, and I believe we'll come to a successful conclusion.
Superintendent, I know that you have spent countless hours working this case, as your colleagues have as well alongside you. You call this the totality of evil, and I pray tonight that you are in fact close to catching this killer, for Abby and Libby, for their families, and for all those who have followed this case so closely. Thank you for your investigative work, and I appreciate you coming on and speaking with us live tonight. I know you don't do it very often. I wish you the best, and
It's been a pleasure.
I'd love to have you back when you catch this guy.
I'd love to come back. Thank you.
Superintendent Doug Carter. And for you at home, I want to thank you for joining us tonight. There have been so many questions about this case, and we don't have all of the answers. Who killed Abby and Libby? What was the motive? And where are they tonight? Are they watching? Did they just hear the investigator say, "He's close, we're coming after you"? These two little girls were best friends. They died together, and we owe it to them to continue to follow every lead. Thank you for joining us for Prime tonight. Thanks for watching. Click the red subscribe button below so you can get more of NewsNation's fact-driven, unbiased coverage.